Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited to be here for yet another video. If you're new here, my name is Sophia and I am 22 years old and living in New York City. I graduated last year from New York University's College of Arts and Sciences, and I am now working full-time in New York and creating content about education and lifestyle. So I'm very happy to have you here watching this video. In today's video, I wanted to go over some questions that I get asked commonly about applying to law in the UK. For context, in 2018, I applied to colleges and universities in the United Kingdom, Spain, and the United States. I've made videos about my college application journey, which I'll link below. So in 2018, I applied to 5 universities in the United Kingdom to read law. And those universities were the University of Oxford, University of Edinburgh, University of Bristol, King's College London, and the London School of Economics. And from those universities, I was accepted to all of them with the exception of the University of Oxford, where I was rejected before the interview stage. But other than that, I was accepted to the remaining 4 universities I applied to, where I was applying for law. So in this video, I kind of wanted to go over some things that I think are best practices in terms of creating a UCAS application if you're interested in reading law. I wanted to touch 3 different topics, which were IB or A-level subject, suggested reading and listening, as well as the famous LNAT. Starting off with the subjects that you should choose when you're picking your A-levels or your IB subject. I did the International Baccalaureate, and for my higher level subjects, I chose English Literature, History, and Global Politics. And the standard levels, I just had my science, my math requirement, and then my foreign language. These are not as important in my opinion. I think the highlight is really with your higher level subjects, because when you're thinking about these in comparison to A-levels only take 3, sometimes 4 subjects, and your higher level subjects are also the ones where you're most concentrated. So I think these are the ones that are really key when you're thinking about choosing your subjects if you're going to study law. So the reason why I chose those 3 subjects was because I found them to be, from the options at my school, the most relevant in terms of studying law. So English Literature, I thought was a great subject. For one, it was something that I was very interested in and I knew that I was going to do well in. And secondly, it's also a subject that requires you to do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, some research, all essential if you're looking to study law, especially the writing aspect. If you want to be a successful law applicant, you need to have good writing and communication skills overall. So that's why I chose English Literature. History, I selected because it was a very classic and conventional choice. It was also a subject that I was super interested in, and again, that I thought I might have some success in. So in terms of that subject, I think if you are choosing your IB or your A-level subjects and history is an option and it is something that you're interested in, I think it's always a great subject. And I think when you're applying to read law, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are subjects that people have been taking for decades, which are great preparation for law and great preparation for life in general, and I think history is definitely one of them. I think it's a subject all of us need to have more knowledge about, especially given current events and kind of our recent trajectory and where our world is going. So I think history is definitely a great subject if you're thinking about studying law. And then global politics I chose because it was a subject that really interested me. Obviously the world of law and the world of politics are intimately tied, and so I thought that would also be a great subject, both in terms of my IB experience and also my preparation for studying law. Those were my 3 subjects. Obviously, if you are thinking about your subjects right now, you don't have to choose those subjects if those are things that you're not interested in or if they're not available at your school. I think in the end, the most important thing is to try to study subjects where you will gain skills or knowledge that you can apply to your study of law. So I think other great subjects might be different languages if you're interested in comparative law or the law of a specific country. Economics could also be a great subject. I even had classmates who studied theater as a preparation for law. So I think really there's a lot of options in terms of what you can study as preparation for law. It just has to be something that makes sense given the subject and that also makes sense for you personally. Moving on to suggested reading and listening. listening. If you've seen my video where I read my personal statement to study law, you'll know that I mentioned several books and a podcast that I studied in preparation for my application. If you haven't seen that video, I will also be linking it below and in this video. And I highly recommend watching it if you're preparing your personal statement at the moment or thinking about doing so in the future. In terms of the books that I read and the podcasts that I listened to, these are just my experience. The books that I read were A Rule of Law, A Theory of Justice, Hitler's American Model, and the podcast that I listened to was the BBC's Law in Action podcast. I will have all of these linked below, but just some explanation of some of my choices. Rule of Law, I forget who the author is, Tom something. It's pretty typical for aspiring law students. That's usually a pretty conventional choice. A lot of people mention it in their personal statement or tie it into their application somehow. I think it's a great book overall, just touches a lot of different subjects, primarily the rule of law. Then A Theory of Justice, pretty traditional political theory text by John Rawls. Just a great book in general, but I think it also gives a lot of good insights and definitely helped me get more in the mindset of thinking about the law and thinking about justice. So I think that's also a great read. It is very complex, so definitely think about whether you want to commit to reading this text. In fact, I actually started my personal statement with a phrase from A Theory of Justice. So definitely one of my favorites. And Hitler's American Model is a book that I read and would definitely recommend if you're interested in history, law, and their intersection. It's a book about how Hitler used the United States Jim Crow laws and applied them to Nazi Germany. Super interesting read, and again, highly recommend if you are interested in history and law. So those were the books that I read. Again, this is just my experience. Definitely read books and texts and essays that are relevant to you and your interest in the field of law that you are looking to focus on or to eventually practice. You really need to focus on the things that you are interested in, because if you're not interested or passionate about these texts, it's going to reflect in your application. So definitely think about what your interests are in connection to law and look for texts that are focused on those fields. And the last thing I did in terms of preparation, kind of studying, was listening to the BBC's Law in Action podcast. This is a super good podcast in general, but especially if you're looking to read law. They cover a variety of topics relating to law and current events. I remember I had heard back in my day one of their podcasts about the legal implications of artificial intelligence and things like traffic accidents with self-driving cars. So definitely a great podcast. They cover a lot of topics from a very interesting perspective and obviously always through the lens of the law. So like with the books, just find what works for you and what's related to the fields that you're interested in. And the last part of a successful application to read law in the United Kingdom is the LNAT. The LNAT is the Legal National Aptitude Test, and it is a standardized test and essay that you have to take if you are applying for law in the United Kingdom. The structure of this test is there's a set number of multiple choice questions, which are really reasoning questions. So in a lot of these, you have a scenario or a case study and they ask you a question. It's multiple choice, and so you answer based on what you deduce from the situation or from the scenario. And then you have an essay section. It's a very short essay because this is a timed test, and I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it definitely is on the shorter end. So the essay, I think mine ended up being maybe 3 paragraphs, very brief. Questions are also touch on topics relating to ethics, to law, justice. So they're very broad. I think the essay question that I had written my essay on was something about whether states had the right to militarily intervene in the affairs of other states. But going back to the test in general, the LNAT is a very challenging subject test. The average scores every year are extremely low. So if you take the test and you're not amazed by your score, don't be discouraged. This is supposed to be a challenging test, and most people do relatively poorly. So don't be hard on yourself if you don't have an amazing score. My score was not that great. I think I got a 23 or 24. This test is supposed to be challenging, and it is only one part of your entire application. So don't focus all of your attention on it, but also don't neglect it. At the end of the day, the most important thing really are your personal statement and your grades. Everything else is either going to improve or decrease your chances of getting into the university of your choice. And in terms of preparing for the LNAT, the only thing you can really do is take the practice papers. They have free ones on the LNAT website. I know you can also buy books that have practice tests and testing strategies, so that's something that you want to focus on. You can look into those materials. Overall, the LNAT is very challenging. You definitely need to prepare for it. I would not go into the test with no preparation whatsoever. Take a few practice tests, write 1 or 2 practice essays, and pray for the best. That's everything that I wanted to cover in this video in terms of applying to read law in the United Kingdom. If you are applying to read law, I hope this was helpful. If you know someone who is interested or might be interested in applying to study law in the UK, make sure to send them this video. I hope this video gave you some good insights, and if you have any questions, as always, make sure to leave them in the comments or reach out to me through Instagram. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching and for being here, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.
My darling, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you.